Today we are here in Saginaw, Michigan, and I am at the Holy Cross Lutheran Cemetery right here in Saginaw, Michigan, and I'm here to visit the final resting place of Robert G. Heft. Now that name probably does not sound familiar to anybody, but what this man did will be very familiar to everyone because he did something for our whole nation that he is remembered for, and this symbol is everywhere in the United States. Everywhere you go, you'll see it on billboards. You'll see it on people's shirts. You'll see this symbol is everywhere, and I cannot wait to tell you his story. And actually, I'm not going to tell you his story myself. I'm going to let Robert tell you his story. Robert he's a folk figure, and he is credited with designing the current 50-star American flag, with which was chosen by Congress as the official national flag of the United States on July 4th, 1960. Take it away, Robert.
I was a junior in high school. I was 17 years old. I'm 65 now. So people think, golly, if you designed our flag, you must be 100 and some years old. I designed it when I was 17 years old as a high school history project. I designed it in 1958, April 18th, 1958. Now the thing that makes that sort of unique, I designed and made the 50-star flag before we had the 49-star flag. In other words, it's actually older than the 49-star flag. And I used to be a real quiet, shy kid. I would always sit in the back of the classroom. I'd never volunteer for anything. Every time the teacher looked my way to call upon me, I'd sort of duck down because I hated to get up in front of a class and talk. But I got straight A's in history. I've always been a history buff, even as a kid, and of course now I sort of like living history. But anyhow, in 1958, Dwight, have you ever heard the name of Dwight David Eisenhower? I'm certain you have, at least in the European theater. Well, anyhow, in 1958, Dwight Eisenhower was President of the United States. I'll bet you that if we take Alaska in, that the politicians in the smoke-filled rooms in Washington are thinking we're taking 2 states rather than 1 to give political balance. And at that time, Hawaii was very Republican. Now, they switched rules now. But anyhow, I thought if they take in 1 state before the next presidential election in 1960, and if you remember, that was Kennedy and Nixon. And they said, boy, this is going to be a barn burner. It's going to be close. So in other words, 80, 90, 100,000 votes one way or the other might make quite a difference. So anyhow, while the professional flag makers were thinking, how would you design a 49-star flag? Well, you have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. If you're good in math, maybe 7 times 7. So that wasn't a challenge to me. Then I thought, well, if I were to make a 50-star flag, how would I arrange those stars? I thought, well, I could have 5 rows of 10, or 10 rows of 5, and that would change the blue field, the proportions. So, and back those days, we didn't have computers and stuff like that, but I was pretty good in math, and I thought, well, how would I put 50 stars on a flag to make it look, not too much different than any of the others, it'd be balanced symmetrically. So if you look at the flag of our country today, in the first row there are 6 stars. And then in the second row there are 5 stars, spaced half space in. And so it goes 6, 5, 6, 5, 6, 5, 6, 5. 5 rows of 6, which is 30. 4 rows of 5 alternating, which is 20. Simple as that makes the 50-star flag. Well, anyhow, at that time I thought, well, I'm going to make a 50-star flag. My mother had an old Singer operating sewing machine. And she wasn't a professional, but she did a lot of sewing. She made all of her own dresses, all of her own aprons, and the pillowcases. She took in sewing for all my aunts and half the neighborhood. Well, anyhow, at that particular time, I thought, I don't know how to sew, but my mom was a pretty good seamstress. So I thought, if I got our 48-star flag that we've had as a matter of fact, we had it for 19 years, they got it as a wedding present, I thought, well, and one of my jobs as a young man, every Flag Day, Veterans Day, and things like that, I would have to hang that flag out on the front porch. We had 2 little eye hooks up there, and I put those up there. And I was active in Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, and it always made me feel proud to be able to hang the flag up on the holidays. So anyhow, I thought, well, we keep that in the front closet right to the front porch. Now, if I took that 48-star flag and sat down and took a seam ripper and a pair of scissors, like a breeding knife, if I took that and I cut the thread where it tied the blue field to the red and white stripes, in other words, I could put in a blank blue field and then figure out how to put the 50 stars on. And that way I wouldn't have to redo the red and white stripes. So without asking my mom or dad or anybody like that, I took that flag out of the closet and I got some into her sewing box and I got the seam ripper out. And I'm sitting on the living room floor cutting up the American flag, separating the blue field. And so I'm sitting there and I have the blue field with 48 stars in this hand, and in this hand I have the red and white stripes. How am I going to sew this flag? Interesting part of history, I had never sewn in my life before sewing the flag of our country. More interesting part, I have never sewn since making the flag of our country, except maybe a button on a shirt or something like that, you know. I'm a bachelor, so I got to do my own sewing and housework, and I love that. But anyhow, since I didn't know how to sew, I know you can loose sew, in other words, tacking the caul or something like that. So I got this blue cotton broadcloth. It cost me $2.87 for the broadcloth, and also the material on the stars. How would I put the stars on? Well, she used to mend sheets, and there was this fabric out called Bondex. They still make it. And it has a glue on the back of it, and you take a hot iron, press it on, and it melts that into the fabric. So I thought if I got enough of that to cut out 100 stars, 50 for either side, that's how I could put the stars on. So and that fabric and the blue field got me $2.87. I wish I'd kept the bill on that, but I didn't. Well, anyhow, I got home and I cut out 100 stars. So anyhow, what I did, I took a yardstick and after I got the dimensions of the spacing on the stars, I thought that way I can get it all evenly, a nice straight line. So I took a hot iron and I tacked just the top of each star on, so that if I wanted to, then I could reposition it by heating it and removing it. Got them all nice and straight, took the iron and pressed one side on. I flipped the flag over because you could see through the fabric, and I put it like up against the window, and I matched the star on the other side and pressed that side on. Now I had to get the blue field with the 50 stars attached to the red and white stripes. And since I had never sewn and my mother did quite a lot of sewing, well, I was thinking, who could I get that is a good seamstress to sew my flag for? Mom. So I went out, and she's still really hot that I cut up the flag. So I went out, and I thought, now I need to do a little bit of public relations. I said, Mom, you know, you've got to be the greatest mother in the whole world. I said, you're a good cook, you do the laundry, you make the bed, you know, and on and on. And she said, what do you want? And she wasn't too thrilled. I said, Mom, I said, I know you're so busy. I hate to really bother you. But if you could go downstairs to your sewing machine and sew my flag, because I didn't know how to put it together, so you know what I did? I scotch taped the back together, thinking she could sew through that tape, and then I could pull the tape off, and that way it would look pretty decent. Well, anyhow, my mom said, I don't, this is a direct quote, she said, I don't want anything to do with that damn flag. She said, and she was really livid. So you know when you're 17, I said, fine, I don't need you, I'll do it myself. So I went down and I'd watched my mother sew a lot. I'd never actually sewn, but I'd watched her. And if you know, nowadays, you know, the drop-in zigzag button holder barely needed a motor. But this old foot-operated sewing machine, you had to shuttle the fabric through there just the right speed. If you did it too slow or too fast, it would jam up. But my mother always had some magic words to make that sewing machine go right, if you know what I mean. And I got the biggest kick out of that. So anyhow, when I'm sewing down there, and I tried to get shuttling the fabric through just the right speed, and it would jam, so I used a few of my mother's magic words. I shouldn't have, but I did, but it seemed to work. So anyhow, I got done with that. It took me 12 and a half hours physically to make this flag. That's the actual time I put in it. And so anyhow, now we had to have this in school on a Monday morning. First period of the morning, I had American history class. And the teacher used words of encouragement for having it in on time. So anybody that don't have their project in on Monday morning class, you're getting an F for the 6-week grading period. That was the inspiration. The teacher's name was Stanley Pratt. He had been a teacher 50 years. So he's what you call an old-fashioned teacher. He was a good one. And so anyhow, I put my flag down on the teacher's desk. And everybody threw their projects on top of it. Now, you know you're never supposed to place anything on top of a flag. And I knew that, but I thought, well, these are fellow students. I don't want to rock the boat. So anyhow, now, it was, like I say, we had two parts. You got graded on the project and then the presentation. The project I liked. The thing is, getting up in front of a group, I just could not do that. So I kept looking at the clock on the wall. And you had to talk about your project for 3 to 5 minutes. That's what you were supposed to take. And I kept looking at the clock. I had about 8 minutes to go. And I'm hoping everybody took all the time and I wouldn't have to get up to talk about it. So anyhow, at that particular time, 8 minutes to go, and a teacher, I never talked back to a teacher in my life. So anyhow, the teacher looked at the flag, and his choice of words, and actually I didn't feel comfortable talking back to the teacher. The first time I ever did in my life, he says, "What's this thing on my desk?" And I turned back and I started walking up there because his choice of words, "What's this thing on my desk?" and it happened to be a flag. So I walked up there and I'm shaking like a leaf. My legs are like a Hershey bar. And I said, "Well, Mr. Pratt, first of all," I started lecturing, "you don't call that thing. That happened to be the flag of a country." And he's counting the stars. He said, "I can't believe it. You get straight A's in here. One of the best history students I've ever had. You don't even know how many states we have." I said, "There's 48. I said, "I can name the capital city, the population, a river goes through it, the major industry, and the governor of the state." I mean, I knew that. That's what I studied when I was a kid. He said, "You got too many stars." So I thought, boy, am I going to impress him. So he looked and he said, "You got too many stars." So I thought, I'm really going to impress him. I said, "Well, you know, right now we have 48 states." He said, "I'm aware of that." I said, "Now, have you read in the paper?" We had what we call filler material in the newspaper. That's where they run out of space before they run out of store, and they pick something off like either the UPI or Associated Press just to fill that space. And it said that they're considering adding Alaska as our 49th state. He said, "I saw that in the paper the other day." He said, "But that's 49. Where did you come up with 50? So I went through this scenario. If we take Democratic Alaska in for political balance, we'll take a Republican Hawaii and get 50. He said, and I remember he asked me, he said, like, "Where did you get your crystal ball?" Well, I couldn't say Walmart. They weren't around then. And so anyhow, it's just a hunch I played as a 17-year-old kid. Now, the professional flag makers were working on how we make the 49-star flag. I never even thought any further than that. So anyhow, I explained to him why my logic. And he said that he looked at me and he said, "I want to tell you." He said, I was arguing with him. He said, "Young man, I'm the teacher, you're the student." Now here comes the challenge that changed my life and sort of brought me out of my shell. He said, "If you don't like the grade I put on your flag, which is a B-," he said, "get it accepted in Washington, then come back and see me and I might consider changing the grade." That's the challenge. And it kept ringing through my head, get it accepted in Washington. And so anyhow, what I did, I sent the flag to the governor of the state of Ohio. I took 4 photographs and I asked the governor at that time to date stamp the back of those photographs, keep one in his file, and then send 3 back to me so I could prove throughout history that there's documentation, in other words. Then I got a letter back from Governor Mike DeSalle who said, "You're to be commended for your interest in history and government. However, I'd like to point out we only have 48 states." In other words, I said that in my letter, but apparently he didn't read it too closely. So then I thought, well, why did I do that? Because anything that happened to our nation's flag would not happen in Columbus, Ohio, but would have happened in Washington, D.C. So I found out, and I at that point had never talked to a city councilman, a mayor, a township trustee, county commissioner. I mean, I didn't travel in those kind of circles. And so anyhow, I found out my congressman lived in my hometown. And so anyhow, I got a bicycle, and I put this flag in a box, and I wrote on a 3 or 4 page letter. I wanted him to take this to Washington, and if they ever had a need for a 50-star flag, this is what I think it should look like. So anyhow, and I can remember riding across town on my bicycle, and I had the flag in a box, knocked at his door, and Mrs. Moeller came to town. She was a congressman's wife, and it was at 5:30, right at supper time, and that bothered me too. And he came to the door and he had a chicken leg in his hand. And I thought, "Oh brother, here I am interrupting Congressman's dinner." And I said, and I didn't know how to address him. I said, "Mr. Congressman?" He said, "Yes." I said, I don't want to take too much of your time, I'm sorry to bother you, but in this box I've got a 50-star flag. He said, no, you don't. And so it sort of took me back. I said, well, in this box I've got a 50-star flag. He said, no, you don't. You can't have, they don't make them. So I thought, I got to rephrase this. I said, in this box, I have a project that I make in American history class at Lancaster High School, and it's a 50-star flag in anticipation of us soon taking in our 50th state. And my congressman said, well, you know, he said in Washington, he said, I've heard they're thinking about taking in Alaska, but I haven't heard anything beyond that. I was impressed. My congressman was up to snuff and up to speed and what. He knew they were talking about Alaska, but he had no idea about anything. I said, well, just take it to Washington. If they have a contest or whatever they do, I'd like you to enter this in the contest for me. So he said, I'll do that. So anyhow, the phone rang, and it was a congressman. And this call came in at 11:15 a.m. on June the 11th. And he said, Mr. Heft, they call me Robert Heft. Everybody, I go by the name of Bob Heft, as you find this moment. Anyhow, he says, this is the congressman, and I'm the chairman of the U.S. Flag Selection Commission. So anyhow, he said, I just wanted to tell you, President Eisenhower has accepted your design as our nation's newest flag. He's going to be calling you later on today. At about 3:20, the secretary comes out of the office. She was very, very pale, and she's looking around and says, Mr. Heft, you're one on the phone again. And I said, who is it this time? She insisted. It's the White House. Oh my Lord! So anyhow, and so I had to walk up there, and I'm walking up there, and I asked my boss, you know, what to say, and he said, I don't know, just wing it. He said, but I want to tell you something. We're putting it on speakerphone, so these 40 draftsmen are going to be listening to my private conversation. So anyhow, and I'm ready to pick up the phone. I'm nervous that my private conversation will be monitored by 40 people. And then he says, also, we're putting it on the PBX or the switchboard so the entire 800 people will be listening in. I mean, at this point, I'm ready to hang up. And I'm sitting on the edge of a desk, and it happened to be a steel case desk, and my legs are about like Hershey bars. And so I picked up the phone, and I said, hello? It was a lady. I thought, oh, this is going to be too bad. I can work it out with the secretary. I don't have to talk to anybody really big. And she says, is this Robert G. Heft? I said, yes, ma'am. She said, one moment. The president would like to speak with you. Hello? He says, is this Robert G. Heft? And I said, yes, sir, but you can just call me Bob. And President Eisenhower sort of chuckled, because he dealt with soldiers overseas and stuff, and he sort of chuckled. He said, this is President Eisenhower. He said, do you have any idea why I'm calling you? No, sir, I really don't, because it's not every day I get a call from you. I wasn't trying to be funny, but I didn't know what to say. He said, real dramatically, do you remember, now this is about 2 years ago, of sending a 50-star flag to Washington? And yeah, I sort of do recall that, you know, at 21 letters, 18. And so he said, I want to be the first to inform you that I've selected your flag as our nation's newest flag. He's the first one to call me. He said, you know what, that makes you the modern day Betsy Ross. When you're a guy, you really don't appreciate that title, you know. But anyhow, I got the point across. And he said, is there a possibility of you coming to Washington, D.C., maybe like July the 1st or so, to be here on July the 4th? He said, can you come over? I said, well, let me ask my boss. He's standing beside me. I reached down, pushed the red button, put the President of the United States on hold. And these were all adults, you know, and some of them had served in the Army and stuff. And they, oh my Lord, what? You don't put the President of the United States on hold? I said, I've already done that. He said, well, why do you do that? I said, he wants me to come to Washington for about 3 or 4 days. It take a day to go over, a day to come back. I'd shoot a whole week. Tell him you'll be there. I said, I don't have any sick leave. I don't have any vacation time. We'll work the details out. We'll charge it off to executive, but get the president back on the phone. Dwight, are you still there? And of course, these adults, oh my Lord. And he said, yes, Bob, I'm still here. So I went to Washington, D.C., and I got there on July 1st, 1960. And like I said, I've been back 14 times to the White House. So anyhow, on July the 4th, the day the flag became official, I'm sitting in front of the U.S. Capitol building. There were about 100,000 people out there. I grew up in a town of 18,000. I was mayor of the city of Napoleon, which is a city of 10,000. I live in rural Saginaw. I live out in the country right now. That's how I like it. Well, anyhow, I'm sitting there. The President of the United States is on this side, and we were on swivel chairs, like on the stage. My flag was the first 50-star flag in America's history to be raised over the Capitol building at 12:01 Eastern Standard Time. President Eisenhower introduced me. He said, "Would you like to say a few words?" Well, like I say, my legs were shaking, and I'm in front of 100,000 people. I stood up and I looked up at the flag as he raised it, and I said, "I hope that this flag represents our great and grateful nation for many years," and sat down because I was about ready to fall. So the next morning I got up, and now we lived on a Marks Avenue, which is sort of like a dead end. It isn't a dead end strip that goes up to the county fairground. You can go around, but I got up next morning and she said, "You better get down here, you've got problems." In front of my house were 3 great big moving vans, ABC, NBC, CBS. And so anyhow, she said, "They want to interview you." So I came down, and I was in 2 hours sleep, and they said, "We'd like to interview you. How does it feel to be the modern day Betsy Ross?" And so I did a pool type interview, in other words, like a press conference. And I said, "Look, I've got to get by the high school, because I wanted to stop there on the way to work, like 7:30, 8 o'clock. So anyhow, Stanley Pratt, my teacher, now was sitting in his desk working on the lesson plans, seating charts, and stuff like that. And they're setting up 13 TV cameras. They had the representative from the American Legion magazine, from VFW, and I do a lot of work with the Legion out of Indianapolis from some of those groups, and the AMVETs and all that. They're there. About 8 or 10 local radio stations, small town, about 8 or 10 newspapers from around the area, plus the Columbus Dispatch, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and the Cincinnati, all the major papers, and a couple magazines. And he looked up and said, "What in the world's coming on?" He lost control of his classroom. They said, "Bob Heft coming back to get his grade changed." He said, "I saw him last night at Homely Brinkley. He won't be back for days." He said, "He's coming down the hall now." He couldn't realize I drove all night to be there. So I walked in, and by this time I'm getting a little bit more bold and gutsy. I walked up and I tried to establish eye contact with him. "Hi, Mr. Pratt, how you doing?" He said, "Not bad." I said, "Remember a couple of years ago when I was in class and made an American Flag for History project?" He said, "Oh," he said, "I sort of recall that." and he wouldn't look at me, and it made me mad. And I said, "Do you remember the grade you gave me on that?" He said, "No," he said, "I can't recall all the grades. It was a B minus." He said, "That sounds about right." I said, "Do you remember what you told me?" He said, "Not exactly." I said, "You told me if I don't like the grade of my flag that you gave me, get it accepted in Washington, then come back and see you. You might consider changing it." I said, "Well, here I am." And so I've got the grade book. I don't carry it with me. It's encased in plastic. But anyhow, it's now we didn't have felt tips in, it was a red ballpoint pen. He said, I guess it was good enough for Washington. It's good enough for me, so I hereby change the grade to the flag to an A. Well, let me tell you a couple things. That flag that I made on my mother's living room floor for $2.87, I still own it, and this is it. This is the very first 50-star flag in our country. I never take it out of the case now because it's chemically treated by Smithsonians that the oil on your fingers won't adhere to it. I told you I have some great nieces and nephews about my grandkids. I set up a trust fund for them for college, and it was advertised on eBay about a year ago for $250,000. They had 11,740 hits on more than any hit they've had on any Elvis stuff or Jackie Kennedy, but it did not sell. It's a pretty good price. But it got a lot of exposure around the world. They called me from California from eBay and said they didn't know it was on there, so I put it on their eBay store in Saginaw, Michigan. And they said they got news stories and stuff like they didn't know it was on. So they said, "Well, we just wanted you to know that we're getting a lot of interest on it." They did not sell, but about 6 months ago, beginning the publicity, 6 months ago, I got a call from a guy named H. Ross Perot. I don't know if you've ever heard that name or not. But anyhow, he wanted to know, and he is interested in purchasing it to donate to Smithsonian's. And he wanted me to keep him in the loop, so to speak. And I thought, well, Ross could buy it. I wouldn't even ask to see his driver's license on his check, you know. But then I got an email about 2 months later, and it was what they call a blind email. So in other words, you can't tell who it's from, but I have a friend that's a computer whiz, and I said, can you trace that back to where it came from? And he found out it came from the Bill Gates Foundation. So it's going to probably be in Smithsonian's in about 2 years, because they've got Smithsonian's closed down where the Star Spangled Banner is, the one they just remodeled. That is the flag. And this is going to be in a flag collection there. But it's up to an auction bid right now, $1.2 million. So that's why I sit back there. I keep a pretty good eye on it.
So if you guys enjoyed this adventure, make sure you hit that thumbs up. Like, share, and subscribe to Michigander Man. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody about Michigander Man so I can grow my channel and do more videos just like this one, guys. I love finding these unusual graves, but they have so much meaning. I mean, who would have thought that a 17-year-old from Saginaw, Michigan would have done something like this, and he will be forever remembered for what he's done for the country. That is an amazing, and he had such an amazing story. I love it. And make sure you guys make sure all of your notifications are on even on your mobile. Check your settings. Make sure every notification is on so you guys know when I'm uploading a new video, because YouTube is getting pretty funny with that stuff nowadays. So it's all up to you guys to share me out. Please share me out. I greatly appreciate it. And make sure, like I said, make sure all your notifications, everything's on so you guys know when I upload a new video. Let's do this. Let's grow together, guys. We can do this. Let's hit that 5K. Help me hit that 5K mark. I'm getting there. It's a slow, long process, but I'm having fun doing it. And I'm really enjoying this. And I want to say thank you to everyone who is a member of my channel, because the memberships help definitely with gas and traveling and certain things like that. So that the memberships definitely help grow the channel also, so I can do more videos like this. I love each and every one of you guys. Thank you for coming on this adventure with me. And until the next one, I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace. Love you.